Hey everyone. The first few times I was preparing to deliver this message to you was a struggle. In fact, if it sounds like I'm reading from my notes, you're not imagining things, because I pretty much am. And that's because this stuff is very important, and getting it right is better than memorizing a script. I'm mentioning all of this because what I was struggling with is my approach and where the sweet spot was. Where was I going to find this 100-mile-an-hour fastball that I could drill over a center field fence? And it's tough. How do you take a familiar topic and share it with business owners who already know what you do but deserve more? How can I make it compelling? And how can I get to the value in the message without having you fall asleep while I'm trying to do it? And most importantly, how can I make it about you? And then it hit me. The clarity I needed, it was so apparent to me. It was exactly the way I felt the first day that I knew that Boulder Valley CPAs needed to deepen our relationships with fewer and just more intentional clientele. And what I mean is that our advisory services are designed to be delivered through the development and the implementation of what we call a well-defined FP&A plan. Using your accounting systems as the cornerstone for relevant and reliable data, we're going to establish goals, leverage technology to report and measure them, and work as a team to make decisions from them. And so, whether you're our largest client or our smallest, a brand new business, cruising through maturity, or someone whose business is ready for the next chapter of your life, there's a phase or a depth of the FP&A process that's right for you. Something that fits the life cycle and the size of your business, and we're here to explore those things with you. And so the key to any successful FP&A plan, and that all businesses need to understand, is what relevant and reliable data looks like and how you know your accounting system is generating it. If you look at what is up on the screen now, there's some critical elements of this, and they really are things we've all heard and discussed before. Now we're going to put it in a framework that it can be delivered from. It makes it measurable, right? And something that we can see objectives and we can measure the key results of those objectives and are we hitting them. Simple things like budgeting to create realistic financial goals and the actual budget tool to achieve those goals. Forecasting, using data from your accounting systems to plan for the future and anticipate risks and other opportunities. Getting to understand and using key performance indicators, right? Understanding what KPI reporting is and knowing that it's there to provide insight to you as a business owner to track the progress of the goals that you've set and the ones that we've agreed to work on together. Gets a little bit deeper down the road. We start talking about investment analysis, right? Using that data and using those conversations to ensure that your business and yourself are making sound financial decisions. When it really gets cooking, we're talking about cash flow management, right? Managing cash flow more effectively. And so, under certain circumstances, identifying potential shortfalls, and under other circumstances, good circumstances, developing strategies to address them. And so that's where business operations and documentations comes in. It it's something that what I really want you to draw value from, and through this webinar, and how you get there. Really view it through that FP&A lens. And so keep that in mind as I take you through this and consider what it means to you and your business. And when this is over, my team is going to share some information, some gathering tools we use for gathering data, and schedule a time, most importantly, for us to meet and to talk. We'll begin the discovery process needed to identify those goals. We'll lay out the timing for follow up needed later in the year. And as we move through other advisory areas, through webinars such as this one, things like entity structure and utilization, income and tax strategies, reasonable compensation, and even succession planning, the role FP&A plays in our relationship will get clearer and clearer. Thank you so much. So here we go. So financial statements. And again, folks, keeping in mind, you've seen and probably heard a lot of this stuff before. These are critical elements for us to make sure you understand are part of this FP&A process and how they fit. And then again, more importantly, take this information, take what you hear, and then bring it to the table when we have that meeting. So everybody's aware, for the most part, what a P&L is and what a balance sheet is. If we're thinking FP&A, you can't do budgeting, you can't do forecasting, and you certainly can't do any kind of KPI driven conversations, let alone get into the depths of the investment analysis and cash flow planning. These are just some sample P&Ls that most people are accustomed to. These are the two types of industries that we work most with. Lots of you are service-based businesses. Others are in the manufacturing realm, construction, things of that nature. These are just good examples of the data that we're going to use in that FP&A process. Again, especially as we work through some of the real foundational things like budgeting and like forecasting and KPIs too. There are some really exciting gross margin KPIs there that are out there. It really just this is just the tip of the iceberg. Again, not getting too deep into this stuff, right? But when we talk about investment analysis and not like stocks, bonds, and mutual funds, where are our company's resources? Maybe that's just as simple as cash, but those of you who are out there could have significant investments in furniture, fixtures, and equipment. You could have growing retirement plans, right, that are in serious need of analysis and consideration. You could also have taken on debt to grow your business and to keep cash flow moving. Company bank accounts, this is really just good practice stuff. None of what we do has any value in it or to it if the things we're working for are not relevant and not reliable. So clearly, if what you're doing business with is not within the framework of that business, these goals are going to be very, very hard to achieve. We can't use personal checking accounts and have a business conversation. These are just some great suggestions that you should follow. Take a close look. Not many folks are using cash transactions, but cash is a really great example of things that could fall outside the realm of your ordinary accounting system and your accounting system's control. Be very careful about cash. Checking and savings accounts, really, I'm reflecting on this for one reason. Because the financials are such a critical element of what we're trying to do through this FP&A process, I just want to highlight some interesting areas that we've seen people kind of wander into unintentionally. If you're transferring money from one account to another, or you're taking money out of the account for yourself, be very careful that those are recorded properly. We oftentimes see people trying to record a transfer from, say, a checking account to a savings account, and through poor accounting system management, they record those transfers as expenses on the P&L. Same thing with payments to themselves. So these are really good examples of ways to be careful around transfers and also ways to be careful when categorizing or quantifying money that you've taken to yourself. When you're doing books, also really good foundational stuff. Please take a close look at it. These are the guardrails that need to be in place if we're going to have that effective or that reliable FP&A process. Business credit cards almost fall into the same category as a good checking account. Lots of common weaknesses. People finding a card that they really like because they get miles or points and things of that nature. Just trying to reiterate here that credit cards should be in the business name and under the business tax identification number. These are just best practices to make sure we're sticking to that reliable data that we need to measure those goals, target those KPIs, do that in analysis that everybody is interested in. Tips for recording some of these expenses. Take a close look. Again, familiar territory. This really helps you understand that charges on the card, as they're recorded properly, that is what generates the expense on the P&L. and it's the occurring of that debt that grows the liability on the balance sheet. What is a personal guarantee? Pretty much exactly what it says. This is you putting your money where your mouth is. This is a substantial element of the forecasting model and budgeting. Understanding the kind of debt and the size of the company debt is critical to making these investment decisions, these cash flow decisions, and these tax planning decisions that are important to you. Cash transactions, not going to spend too much time on here. Again, just making sure this is an antiquated approach. And because it's an antiquated approach to doing business, it's filled with risks. It's filled with potholes that you could stumble into. Please take a close look. We want to make sure you have a strong understanding of this and that you're minimizing risk by not operating in a cash environment. And if you have to, you're being very careful. Reimbursements. I really like this topic because it's important for the budgeting and for the forecasting component of FP&A. Understanding truly what was a business expense and what was a personal expense is critical to the budgeting component. We can't make plans for cash if we're not properly building a budget off of reliable historical data. If your expenses have been crossed between business and personal, your financials aren't going to be inaccurate. The budgets we try to produce from them will be inaccurate, and it's going to take some time to figure out where the weaknesses were when the budget process doesn't deliver the results that we're looking for. Really, just some best practices in here around reimbursements. Let's go through that. Um, Again, we broke this into two parts just to make sure people understand how to track reimbursements. Again, these are just wonderful guardrails to make sure that the data we're using to make decisions is top notch and reliable. This is really just some great follow up on how to reimburse. Again, good accountability issues, good corporate governance. This is also a really nice handy dandy tool to track reimbursed expenses if this is new territory to you. Really take a close look at it. It's important that this stuff be reliable. Here's some typical example of expenses that you might be reimbursing for yourself and documentation. So this goes hand in hand with a bunch of good corporate governance stuff and really just running your business well. Not going to spend too much time on it because it's most of it is pretty familiar to you all. Really, the centerpiece of this is keep your receipts. We want to run your accounting system and we want to build our expectations from what comes out of that in a highly documented way. If that information can't be documented, then we really can't rely on it. And then again, we can't generate the information to make sure that the goals that we've stated together and that we formed together and that we're measuring together are reliable. Not going to get too crazy about cash documentation. We've talked a bunch about that. Record keeping. Record keeping, record keeping, record keeping. This is also hand in hand with the prior topic, goes perfectly well with good corporate governance, and again, is absolutely integral to a successful FP&A process. This is some good information to let you know what you have to keep as either the officer of a corporation or an individual. Bulletproofing this information. Again, this is kind of the cousin to the what management's needs are for a reliable and a valuable FP&A process. If we're audit proofing your records, then we have beyond reasonable doubt built an FP&A process that also has the highest level of reliability, generating the most relevant information for us to draw from. Calendars are always a great way to get comfortable where the FP&A process is. Also, great good documentation efforts. Again, just a best practices form of information that we want to share with everybody. Take a close look. Record retention, critical again to both tax compliance work as well as the financial planning and analysis that we want to do with you. This is just a list of stuff that you can always draw from. This is always available to you again through our office. Please take a close look. This is some FAQs about record retention. Also, take a close look. We're going to be chatting soon, but the team is always ready to answer these questions for you as well. Document storage, not going to get too crazy about this, but if you can't find it, we can't act on it, substantive, evidentiary, reliable information is what we need to have and is part of the best practices we encourage all of our business clients to approach. This is just some great information on what to do with documentation. Nobody really needs to know what a scanner is, but duplex scanning is the way to go. IRS accepts scanned images as original documentation. You want to keep that in mind. Things to watch. Using a PDF file as your standard. These next slides, I'm going to go through them quickly because we'll talk about them more in the future. But these are quintessential best practices within your organization to make the financial planning and analysis process, or the plan that we come up together, really, really substantive and really reliable. And what I mean is this: having things in a common area, right? When we're getting really deep into forecasting, really deep into KPIs, knowing where to retrieve the most important data in your organization may sound obvious, but is really not for a lot of people. Please take a close look at what this means. Figure out what your centralized storage systems look like, down to folder structures. Whenever we're targeting things, right? Things that are important to you, right? Um, where cash is going, right? Where the problems lie. The last thing we want to be doing is looking around for the hard docs or the PDFs that support the process and support the objectives and support the KPIs that we all agree to. Again, this may appear to be common sense to a lot of people, but it is a best practice, and I really encourage you to take a close look. We talked about bulletproofing. This is a really good example of a way to come up with a good naming convention for the things that you save. We've seen people come up with some very interesting descriptions for business related documents. This is just designed to encourage you to use a common and reoccurring approach. More things to consider. Accounting systems are the cornerstone for everything that I just talked about. We're going to be working with you through those accounting systems, whether we do your bookkeeping for you, whether you have your own accounting system that you deliver the data to us for. We need you to be on something that's useful to us, that generates good data, because that information is integral to forecasting, to budgeting, to KPIs, to cash flow measurement, right? And investment analysis. Take a look at your financials, right? We just went through a whole bunch of things here. Your P&L can't be 6 pages long. It can't be using proper nouns like the name of your software provider in the P&L. It's got to have consistent data entry. You have to have a plan to executing and using it well. And this is something we can really help you with. And so, folks, that's it in a nutshell. From here on out, like I mentioned earlier, we're going to share some information gathering tools with you, and the office will be in touch very soon to schedule that appointment. I know this guy took a little bit longer, but this is some really, really deep, substantive information. Use it to spark that conversation, use it to get into the office, and then let's take it from here. Thank you all so much. Bye bye.